My name is Trisha. I am 28 years old, and for years I was the invisible ATM funding my entire family's fake life. It took exactly one dinner, one plate scraped away from me in front of 12 relatives, and 3 taps on a banking app to shut that machine down forever. What happened next inside that private dining room is something none of them ever saw coming, and by the time it was over, their entire world had collapsed at the table. In front of 12 relatives, inside a private room at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, my mother reached across the table and deliberately shoved a plate of premium steak away from me. The heavy ceramic scraped hard against the glass tabletop, a sound so sharp it cut straight through the low chatter, and it landed with a thud directly in front of my older sister. The entire table went dead silent. Even the waiters in their crisp black suits took a visible step backward, none of them daring to intervene. My mother looked at me with pure, undisguised disdain. "This wasn't bought with your money," she announced, loud enough to make sure every aunt and uncle at that table heard every word. "This is expensive. It's not for you. If you want some, buy it yourself. You can eat bread." My older sister didn't even bother looking up. She just smirked, dragging her knife slowly through the tender meat like she was savoring a private joke. "She's right," she sneered. "Poor people can only afford bread anyway." A few relatives actually laughed. Every eye at that table turned toward me, waiting. They wanted tears. They wanted me to bolt from the room, or scream, or beg. I gave them none of it. I simply reached for a piece of toasted bread, took a slow bite, and quietly unlocked my banking app under the table where no one could see my hands. With 3 precise taps, I severed the exact financial lifeline they had been secretly draining from me for years. A few seconds later, my mother's phone buzzed hard against the tablecloth. That single buzz was the sound of their entire fake wealthy world beginning to collapse, and none of them even realized it yet. If you want to see exactly how I exposed their lies, left them holding a bill they couldn't pay, and walked out of that family for good, stay until the end, because this story only gets more satisfying from here. My sister Darla had spent years acting like the wealthy savior of our family. She introduced herself to everyone as a freelance content creator, a rising star in her own mind. In reality, she had 0 paying clients. Her typical day started at noon, involved ordering $30 artisan meals delivered to the house, and hours spent filming unboxing videos in our living room wearing designer sunglasses indoors, carrying luxury bags just to walk to the mailbox. My mother, Irma, adored the image Darla projected. She bragged constantly to the neighbors about her wildly successful eldest daughter. I lived in a completely different reality. I worked as a senior financial analyst at a downtown firm. My days began at 6 in the morning and often didn't end until long after the sun went down. I stared at spreadsheets, analyzed market trends, and managed corporate portfolios worth more money than my family could imagine. Because of my stable income, I quietly handled every family expense. Every grocery run, every utility bill, every luxury item Darla flaunted online was funded, silently, by my paycheck. I never once boasted about it. I just made sure the household kept running. My father, Ryan, had no idea any of this was happening. He had recently retired from his engineering career and lived carefully off his retirement savings, brewing his own plain coffee at dawn and driving a 10-year-old sedan he refused to replace. Ryan genuinely believed Darla's internet career was funding the family's sudden lifestyle upgrades. He would pat her on the shoulder and tell her how proud he was that she took such good care of her mother. I watched these moments happen again and again. I kept my mouth shut. I valued peace in that house more than I valued credit for my own money. The entire dynamic survived on one carefully maintained illusion, and I was the only one who understood exactly how fragile it really was. One particular Tuesday afternoon captured their daily routine perfectly. I was working from home that day, sitting at the kitchen island with my laptop open. The mail carrier dropped a stack of envelopes through the front door slot, the heavy paper hitting the hardwood floor with a distinct thud that echoed down the hallway. Irma walked over, flipped through grocery flyers and local magazines, and stopped cold on a thick white envelope stamped with a bank logo. A credit card summary. Before she could even break the seal, Darla came rushing down the stairs in a silk bathrobe, phone already raised, recording herself. She snatched the envelope directly out of our mother's hands. "Mom, don't worry, I'll handle everything," Darla said smoothly, tossing her hair for the camera. "I always take care of my favorite people. You don't need to look at boring bills." Irma beamed with pride. She reached out and patted Darla's cheek. "You work so hard, sweetie. Don't stress yourself out paying for all our things. We appreciate you." Darla nodded, folded the unopened envelope in half, and shoved it carelessly into her bathrobe pocket, then turned and walked straight back upstairs without another word. She never opened it. She never checked the balance. She simply hid the physical evidence from my father before he ever saw it. From my seat in the kitchen, I watched the entire performance unfold. I said nothing. I didn't correct my mother. I turned my eyes back to my laptop screen, where my email inbox refreshed automatically. A new message appeared at the very top of the list, the electronic version of the exact same statement Darla had just confiscated. The subject line quietly displayed a balance in the thousands. That paper envelope downstairs meant absolutely nothing. The entire banking system ran through my personal email and my checking account. I clicked open the digital statement and scrolled through the charges: Darla's newest designer shoes, Irma's premium skincare, several expensive restaurant tabs. I moved my cursor to the payment portal, selected the full balance, and authorized the transfer, clearing the debt instantly with my own hard-earned salary. The confirmation screen flashed green. Darla got the endless praise. Irma got the bragging rights. I got the receipts. This was our normal. I funded their fake reality month after month while they ignored my contribution completely. I tolerated the blatant disrespect. I swallowed the daily insults. I kept the family afloat from the shadows, asking for absolutely nothing in return, and I told myself that was simply the price of peace. 2 weeks before that dinner, Irma began finalizing plans for her 58th birthday. She wanted an event that would force all 12 invited relatives to acknowledge her elevated status once and for all. She skipped the standard local venues entirely and drove downtown to a highly exclusive French fine dining restaurant. She walked confidently through the heavy glass doors and demanded to speak with the event coordinator directly. The manager politely explained the restaurant's strict booking policy. Securing their most prestigious private room for a Friday evening required a substantial upfront deposit to cover the space and the catering minimums. Irma didn't flinch. She opened her purse, pulled out a credit card bearing her name, and set it firmly on the counter. The machine processed the charge and beeped its approval. The receipt printed instantly. Irma signed with a flourish, secured her reservation, and walked out feeling powerful, untouchable, and completely unaware of what that card actually represented. The spending didn't stop there. Irma met Darla that same afternoon to finish their preparations, and the two of them launched into a full afternoon of excess across the city. They started at a premium hair salon known for its celebrity clientele, spending 3 hours on cuts, color, and styling. When the bill came, out came the same card. Next, a luxury day spa 3 blocks away, deep tissue massages and advanced facial treatments to make sure they both looked flawless for the family. The card was swiped again without a second of hesitation. Finally, they walked into a high-end designer boutique. Irma wanted a brand new dress for her grand entrance. Darla, still playing the role of a wealthy creative director, insisted on a matching silk outfit and a new pair of designer heels. They piled a mountain of clothing onto the counter. The cashier scanned it all, the total climbing into a staggering figure, and Irma handed the card over one final time. The transaction processed instantly. They walked out carrying armfuls of branded shopping bags, utterly unbothered by the amount of money they had just spent in a single afternoon. Miles away, I sat in my corner office on the 15th floor, dual monitors glowing with financial models, quarterly reports, and budget projections. I was typing fast, preparing for a mandatory presentation later that day. My phone sat quietly on the desk beside my coffee mug. Then the screen lit up. A push notification from my banking app appeared. A charge of over $2,000 at a French restaurant in San Francisco. I didn't touch the phone. I kept typing. 10 minutes later, the screen lit up again, a new alert stacking on top of the first, this one a $400 charge at a premium salon. The notifications settled into a steady, predictable rhythm through the rest of my workday. An hour passed, and the screen flashed again, $800 at a luxury spa. Another hour, $1,500 at a designer boutique. The numbers stacked up in front of me, drawing a precise, real-time map of exactly where they were, exactly what they were buying, and exactly how much of my money it was costing. I understood exactly what was happening. Irma and Darla were building the stage for their vanity project, buying the props, securing the venue, crafting the perfect wealthy personas to present to our extended family, all of it funded by a credit line I had authorized and they had never once earned. I felt the final buzz register against the desk as the last boutique receipt came through. A normal person might have panicked, called the fraud department, or phoned their mother screaming. I did neither. I simply flipped the phone face down, turned my attention back to my spreadsheet, and kept working. At 7 o'clock that Friday evening, my parents, Darla, and I walked through the heavy double doors of the private dining room. 12 relatives were already seated, and they rose immediately with cheers and applause the moment we entered. The staff had prepared the space to perfection, waiters in crisp uniforms lining the walls, ready to pull out chairs and unfold linen napkins. Irma walked straight to the head of the table like visiting royalty, her new designer handbag balanced deliberately on her forearm, the gold logo angled toward the center of the room for maximum visibility. Darla took the seat to her right, basking in the attention. I walked quietly to the far end of the table and sat beside my father, Ryan. The relatives settled into their seats, lifting heavy crystal glasses, examining the polished silverware, whispering among themselves about the obvious cost of booking a room like this on a Friday night. The atmosphere felt suffocating, thick with forced politeness and calculated displays of wealth that everyone at the table could feel but no one dared to name. A waiter handed Ryan a leather-bound wine list. He opened it, saw the prices, and quietly closed it again, his face going pale. Irma snatched the menu straight out of his hands and ordered 3 bottles of the most expensive imported champagne on the list without even glancing at the price. Darla insists we only drink the best tonight, she announced to the waiter, pointing proudly at her eldest daughter. A cousin across the table leaned forward, pointing at the handbag resting near Irma's plate. Darla bought your mother such a beautiful bag. I saw that exact model in a luxury magazine last week. It costs a fortune. Irma smiled brightly, running her hand over the smooth leather, making sure everyone noticed her fresh manicure. Yes, she did. Darla always spoils me. She never checks the price when it comes to family. Aunt Wanda, seated 2 chairs down, folded her hands on the table and looked at Darla with something close to reverence. Your sister really knows how to take care of family. It takes a special kind of success to afford a venue like this for a birthday, plus all those gifts. You must be doing incredibly well with your content creation. Darla waved her hand dismissively, perfectly playing the role of a humble millionaire. It's nothing, Aunt Wanda. Family comes first. I just want my mother to have the celebration she truly deserves. The relatives nodded in unison, raising their water glasses in a silent toast to Darla. Ryan smiled at his eldest daughter, clearly proud, though he still looked slightly out of place in his faded suit among all that borrowed glamour. I stayed completely silent, hands folded neatly in my lap. Then Aunt Wanda's eyes drifted down the table and landed on me. She tilted her head, one eyebrow raised, sharp and critical. So what do you actually do, Tricia? Still working behind a desk? The conversation around the table stopped. Several relatives turned to look at my corner. I'm a financial analyst, I answered evenly, holding her gaze. Aunt Wanda let out a short, dismissive laugh. Right. Numbers and spreadsheets. Sounds exhausting and not very financially rewarding, I'd imagine. Not everyone can have Darla's creative talent and financial freedom. When are you going to step up and treat your parents to something nice? Before I could answer, Irma leaned forward and cut in. Tricia just does basic data entry, she said loudly, making sure every relative was listening. She sits in a tiny cubicle all day. Her company barely pays her enough to cover gas and lunch. She has no real ambition to improve her life. She still lives at home because she simply cannot afford to live on her own. If it weren't for us letting her stay, she'd be struggling on the streets. Darla tries to inspire her, but some people are just meant to be followers. She relies entirely on us. A heavy silence fell over my end of the table. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, staring down at his empty plate, clearing his throat but saying nothing. The other relatives exchanged knowing glances, several nodding in agreement with Irma's assessment, looking at me with a mixture of pity and quiet superiority. They had built an entire narrative, Darla the wealthy provider, me the useless burden dragging the family down, using money I had earned from a job they'd just called meaningless. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct a single word of Irma's lie. Arguing would only give them a stage to play the victim on. I reached for my glass, took a slow sip of ice water, set it back down, and offered Aunt Wanda a faint, polite smile, letting them all keep drowning happily in their own illusion. When the waiters finally arrived with the main course, the atmosphere shifted from conversational to sharply expectant. The heavy doors swung open, and a line of servers in matching black suits stepped in with perfect synchronization, carrying massive silver trays balanced on their shoulders. The rich smell of roasted garlic, charred meat, and rosemary filled the room instantly. They moved around the table, setting down enormous sizzling cuts of premium steak in front of each guest, resting on beds of roasted vegetables and drenched in dark, savory sauce. The waiter assigned to my section placed the heavy ceramic plate in front of me with a soft clink. The heat rose against my face. I picked up my fork in one hand and my knife in the other, resting my wrists gently on the table's edge, ready for the first real meal I'd had all day. Before the blade could even touch the meat, a sudden, violent movement broke my focus. Irma stood up sharply from her seat at the head of the table, reached her arm all the way across the glass surface, and clamped her hand down hard on the rim of my plate. With one forceful yank, she dragged the heavy ceramic dish out from under my hands. The bottom of the plate screeched against the glass tabletop, a harsh sound that sliced straight through the soft background music, and she slid the steak down the length of the table until it landed directly in front of Darla. She glared at me. "This is expensive," she said, her voice sharp and stripped of any warmth. "It's not for you. If you want some, buy it yourself." The cruelty of it hung in the air, deliberate and total. What followed was pure, suffocating silence. All 12 relatives went dead still. Forks froze midair. Conversations died mid-sentence. Eyes darted nervously between Irma and me. Even the restaurant staff froze. A waiter 2 feet away, mid-pour on a glass of red wine for my uncle, stopped instantly, pulling the bottle back so fast a single drop stained the white tablecloth. He exchanged a panicked glance with the head server standing near the door. The entire staff took a slow, synchronized step back toward the walls. Nobody dared intervene. It was a vicious family dispute unfolding in the middle of a 5-star restaurant, and the tension in that room felt like it could shatter glass. I glanced at my father. Ryan sat frozen, gripping his linen napkin so tightly his knuckles had gone white, his face flushed deep red, but he said nothing. He chose the path of least resistance, letting Irma humiliate me in front of our entire extended family rather than risk a scene. Darla didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look apologetic. She looked entirely entitled. She pulled the stolen plate closer, pressed her knife into the meat, sliced easily through it, and lifted a piece to her mouth, chewing slowly while holding direct, challenging eye contact with me the entire time. She swallowed, wiped the corner of her mouth, and let out a short, mocking laugh. "She's right," Darla sneered. "Poor people can only afford bread." A few relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Several looked down at their laps, refusing to meet my eyes. Nobody spoke up for me. Nobody offered to share their meal. They simply accepted the new dynamic Irma had just forced into existence. I sat perfectly still. My hands rested on the edge of the table. My plate was gone, and the space in front of me sat completely empty. The humiliation they intended to inflict was enormous, but I felt no shame at all. I felt no urge to cry, to raise my voice, or to storm out of that room. My silence reached its absolute peak, and the anger inside me didn't explode outward, it solidified into something colder and far more useful. Calculated focus. My racing heartbeat slowed into a steady, deliberate rhythm. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't ask for the plate back. I simply lowered my hands into my lap, out of sight beneath the heavy tablecloth. I unclasped my purse, reached inside, and pulled out my phone, angling it downward into the shadows of the table. I unlocked the screen with my thumb, bypassed my messages, and opened my primary banking app. A fingerprint prompt appeared. I pressed my thumb to the sensor and the dashboard loaded instantly, checking, savings, and credit accounts laid out in neat rows. I navigated straight to the credit card management portal, the exact section of the app that held the truth behind their entire illusion. For years, Irma and Darla had paraded through this city flashing premium plastic at boutiques and restaurants, acting like self-made millionaires in front of everyone we knew. But the banking system held the real story. The main account belonged entirely to me. My name sat at the top of the financial hierarchy. Irma and Darla were listed underneath as authorized users, nothing more. No credit history of their own. No real assets. Just secondary cards tethered to my salary, living entirely on my good graces. And I decided, right there under that tablecloth, to end those graces for good. I tapped Irma's profile first. A menu of administrative options dropped down. I didn't hesitate. I pressed the red button labeled Remove Authorized User. A warning popped up, confirming this action would permanently sever her access to the credit line. I hit Confirm. Then I selected Deactivate Card, making sure the physical plastic sitting in her purse would fail the instant anyone tried to use it. The screen refreshed. Status, terminated. I scrolled down to Darla's profile next. She sat a few feet away, sipping wine and chewing the steak she'd stolen off my plate. I repeated the exact same process. Remove authorized user. Confirm. Deactivate card. With a few simple taps on a glass screen, I dismantled their entire fake empire in complete silence. I cut off their financial oxygen without making a single sound. I wasn't finished. I backed out of the card management menu and opened the Scheduled Transactions tab, scrolling past utility bills until I found the recurring monthly charge for the Ladies' Country Club, Irma's favorite social weapon, the membership she used to network with wealthy wives and brag about a lifestyle that was never actually hers. I clicked the active subscription, selected Remove Payment Method, and canceled every future automatic transfer. The app processed the request and returned a green checkmark. The funding stopped instantly. Less than 10 seconds later, a sharp buzz vibrated against the glass table. Irma's phone lit up next to her water glass, an automated bank alert flashing across the lock screen. She paused mid-chew and glanced down, squinting at the preview text without bothering to unlock the phone. Probably just spam, she muttered to Aunt Wanda, swiping the notification away. She picked her fork back up, stabbed another piece of the steak she'd stolen from me, and kept eating, completely unaware that her entire financial reality had just quietly ceased to exist. I locked my phone and slid it back into my purse, brought my hands back above the table, and reached for the woven bread basket in the center. I pulled out a thick slice of sourdough, spread a layer of butter across it with a silver knife, and took a slow, deliberate bite, chewing plain bread in total silence while they feasted around me, oblivious to what I had just done. 45 minutes later, dinner service finally wound down. Waiters moved silently around the table, clearing empty plates and replacing silverware. The 12 relatives leaned back, sipping the last of the expensive wine, everyone fully aware the total bill was going to be astronomical. Then the heavy doors opened, and the restaurant manager stepped in, walking with practiced professionalism, a sleek black leather folder in hand. He stopped at the head of the table and set the folder gently in front of Irma. She didn't even open it to check the itemized charges. She kept her chin raised, reached into her designer handbag, pulled out the credit card, and set it firmly on top of the folder, glancing down the table to make sure Aunt Wanda and the others were watching her handle the massive expense so casually. The manager picked up the card, pulled a mobile card reader from his jacket, slid the chip into place, typed in the total, and pressed confirm. The machine processed the request for 3 long seconds. The internal gears whirred quietly. Then a sharp double beep cut through the tense silence. The small screen flashed red. Declined. The manager kept his composure perfectly intact, discreetly angling the terminal away from the guests. He leaned down slightly. "Ma'am, there seems to be an error with the card. Do you have another one we could use?" Irma scoffed, waving her hand, insisting his machine must be broken, demanding he run it again. At that exact moment, her phone lit up beside her water glass. A new text notification. Not spam this time. It read, "Card deactivated." Before the screen could even dim, a second notification stacked on top of it, an automated email from the Ladies' Country Club. Payment method failed. Darla, sitting right beside her mother, glanced down at the glowing screen. Her eyes went wide as she read the words. She lifted her head slowly and looked straight down the table at me. I stared right back at her, chewing my bread without expression. Darla connected the dots instantly. The missing steak. My total silence. The deactivated cards. It all clicked into place at once. She understood, with sudden and total clarity, that I had permanently cut the feed, and the massive bill sitting on that table now had nowhere left to go. Darla didn't warn our mother. She didn't offer to help. She simply picked up her phone, pressed it to her ear, and announced, "I need to take this call." She pushed her chair back, grabbed her purse, and walked briskly out through the side door, abandoning the sinking ship entirely, never once looking back. Irma stared down at her phone. The confident posture she'd carried all night vanished in an instant. Color drained from her face. Beads of sweat gathered along her hairline. The illusion of wealth she had spent weeks constructing shattered right there at the table. The relatives noticed the shift immediately, falling quiet, watching her struggle. The manager stood patiently, waiting for a valid form of payment. Irma swallowed hard, her hands beginning to tremble. She leaned toward me, dropping her voice to a desperate whisper so the guests wouldn't hear the panic underneath it. "Trisha," she hissed, eyes wide with fear. "Open your app. Fix this right now. Tell the bank to authorize the payment." I set my butter knife down, wiped the corners of my mouth with my napkin, and turned to look her directly in the eyes. I didn't lower my voice. I made sure every single relative at that table heard my answer clearly. "I thought Darla was paying," I said coldly. "You said I shouldn't touch expensive things." The next morning, the full weight of the night before settled heavily over the house. The memory of the restaurant's chaotic ending was still raw. To keep the manager from calling the police and destroying our family's reputation in front of 12 witnesses, my father had stepped forward. He bypassed Irma's frozen panic, handed over his own debit card, and stood at the host stand authorizing the massive charge himself, fully aware of what it meant. Covering that bill drained a significant chunk of his retirement savings in a single transaction, compromising his own financial security to pay for his wife's vanity. Now the morning light filled a completely fractured house. Ryan sat at the dining table, no coffee brewing, his face stern, etched with exhaustion and quiet fury. He pointed to the chair across from him and told me, firmly, to sit down and open my laptop. He wanted the raw data. No more stories. No more illusions. I didn't hesitate. I set the laptop on the table, typed in my credentials, and turned the screen toward him, pulling up 3 years of transaction history. Ryan put on his reading glasses and leaned in, scrolling methodically through thousands of rows of data. He saw the exact deposit for the French restaurant. He saw the recurring country club charges. He worked through the grocery bills, the utility payments, the boutique purchases, the salon visits, tracing every single dollar back to my salary deposits. Then he searched for Darla's name. Any incoming transfer. Any cash deposit. Any contribution at all from his supposedly wealthy eldest daughter. He found nothing. The numbers told the truth without a single word from me. I had funded their entire existence, and Darla had never once contributed a cent. Ryan closed the laptop hard, stood up, and walked straight upstairs to Darla's room. She hadn't come home that night, likely crashing somewhere to avoid the fallout. He pulled 2 suitcases from her closet and began throwing in her silk robes, designer shoes, and expensive makeup, none of it folded, all of it shoved in carelessly. He zipped the bags shut, dragged them down the stairs, and set them out on the front porch. Then he grabbed his toolbox, removed the front door knob entirely, and installed a new deadbolt. His phone buzzed non-stop on the counter with frantic texts from Darla, begging to be let back inside. He ignored every one of them. Irma sat on the living room sofa, watching her husband dismantle her favorite daughter's fabricated life piece by piece. She wept quietly, clutching a throw pillow to her chest. She reached for his hand. He stepped back, visibly repulsed. He didn't yell. He didn't lose his temper. His voice came out cold, mechanical, and terrifyingly calm. "I've already called a lawyer," he said, cutting straight through her quiet sobs. "If nothing changes and you don't pay me back, I'm filing on Monday." Irma gasped and buried her face in her hands. The consequences of her own arrogance had finally arrived, and there was no illusion left large enough to hide from them. I didn't stay to watch her cry. I had already packed my own things into 2 duffel bags before the sun came up that morning. I walked into the kitchen, set my house key down on the granite counter, and let it clink against the stone, loud and final, a quiet resignation from a family I had spent years financing and receiving nothing but contempt in return. I slung the bags over my shoulder and walked toward the front door. Ryan gave me a brief, apologetic nod, finally seeing the weight I had carried silently for years. I didn't nod back. An apology that arrives after years of silence doesn't undo the disrespect, and it doesn't refund what it cost me. I walked out through the newly reinforced front door, loaded my bags into the trunk of my car, and drove away, cutting the last of those toxic ties for good. They spent years deciding I was worth less than bread while I quietly paid for every steak on that table. In the end, all it took to end the whole performance was 3 taps on a screen, and the truth doing the rest of the work by itself.